How's it going, everybody? Joseph here with another Maestro DMX tip and trick video. This video is going to specifically focus on controlling Maestro DMX using MIDI. I have found a fairly inexpensive piece of software that runs on Android-based tablets called TouchOSC. TouchOSC is a virtual MIDI controller kind of software that you can run on an Android device. It also runs on iOS, however, iOS has a few limitations that I'll explain here in a little bit. But as mentioned, TouchOSC is available in the Google Play Store. It is $11.99 for the software. Fairly inexpensive, especially if you're looking for something to control your Maestro DMX device using MIDI, and you already have an Android tablet laying around. This will work best on any Android tablet that supports the ability to do MIDI over USB. One thing that you can double check to see if your tablet supports that is on your Android tablet itself. This is the TouchOSC interface, but I will switch back to the main interface here. On your Android device, if you go into your device settings and then you search for USB preferences, should come up with this USB preferences option here. And checking preferences, if you have an option for MIDI under USB preferences, this application may work for you. I've tested this on Android 14 on a cell phone. I've also tested it on Android 11 on another cell phone, as well as Android 14 on a tablet. I do recommend, a tablet-style device so you can put a bunch of buttons on the interface. A cell phone might be a little bit harder. The screen's a bit smaller, so the buttons would have to be tinier in order to control all of those MIDI functions available through Maestro. So once you have TouchOSC installed on your tablet and you have your tablet configured for MIDI support there using the USB preferences page, you'll want to launch TouchOSC, and that'll just be right there in your applications list. When you first launch TouchOSC, it will take you to a main window here, and I am going to open a new window just to kind of show you what this looks like here. We will do a new, if I can get the option here to do a new one. No, we do not want to save. We want to import. There we go. Alright, so we have a new window here. Now, by default, when you first open TouchOSC, it will open a blank slate here for your MIDI controller. So this is where you build that controller specifically on your Android device or on iOS. Again, like I mentioned, iOS does support TouchOSC, but I have not found the ability to do MIDI over USB. The one benefit of an Android device is you can send MIDI data over USB as long as your device supports it. So really you'll just have to plug your tablet into Maestro, into one of the USB ports, using a USB cable, and then you'll have a display on your tablet that you can control those different Maestro functions available via MIDI. So what functions are available currently? So looking at MaestroDMX, with the recent 1.1 update, we have a few more buttons that we can control with MIDI. We can now control our blackout button, our blinder button, our strobe button, that fog button, and the effect button. And the nice thing is with TouchOSC, you can configure that in a way to where you can set those buttons to be toggle buttons. So instead of having to hold down that blackout button within MaestroDMX to black out your lights, you can now trigger that using a MIDI device and have that button be a toggle based button. So you tap it to toggle it on, tap it again to toggle it off. Same thing with like fog effects, with strobe effects. You can do all that with that toggle button. And then we also still have all that previous functionality that was there before for controlling our cues within Maestro. So show those specific cues under show control there on the MaestroDMX page. And that's where you're going to have that previous, next, play, pause, stop, and then the select cue functionality there within the MaestroDMX MIDI documentation here in the manual. Now, the original manual may not have these updated details for the keys for blackout, blinder, strobe, fog, and effect. But look out for those updates. It's also been posted in the Facebook group. If you ask for it and you can't find it, somebody will be able to post that image for you as well. But looking at TouchOSC specifically, once you've built out your MIDI-based device in TouchOSC, you'll be able to send those commands over to MaestroDMX. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my PC here, which is going to have the specific window open for TouchOSC. So yep, we have TouchOSC there. And we're just gonna expand this one out because it looks like my camera has frozen here. But that is okay. You guys don't need to look at my face today while I talk here. So we'll just move this around a little bit. We'll kill that camera. So I have TouchOSC running my PC, but this interface is going to look very similar on your Android device. So adding buttons within TouchOSC, buttons specifically that can trigger MIDI events. So once you're on your blank page here, you click on the Add button at the top there, which will bring down a menu, and then you'll want to choose Button. That will place a generic button on your window here, and you can drag and drop this button around. You can place it where you want, but that is the creation of a button. Now specifically, we need to program this button to send a MIDI note on and a note off. So if we're trying to program a button for those specific triggers at the top of Maestro, so for blackout or for strobe or for blinder, we'd probably want that button to be a toggle-based button. So once you have the button added to your interface, you want to make sure it's selected. And then over here on the right, you're going to have a bunch of different options. And what we're going to want to do is, first and foremost, we'll probably want to change the color of this button. I generally like just gray for my buttons, which is just 80-80-80. If you enter that in for that code, that will turn that button into a gray color. As you see the color there as gray. Now, if you scroll down a bit, you will see the button shape and type. Rectangles are pretty good for buttons. If you like triangles or diamonds or pentagons or hexagons, you can pick your poison there, or circles. I just like doing the rectangles. And for the button type, we're going to want to switch this over from momentary to toggle press. And what this is going to do is the button will toggle on the press of the button, and then when you press it again, it will toggle off. So we've set that toggle type, and we can leave the rest of the values like they are. Now if we scroll down a little bit more, we're going to see some options here for messages, and this is where we're going to want to configure our MIDI specific messages going out of this button. So when you first add the button to the page, you'll likely see MIDI here already with control change. We do need to change that from control change to note on. So what we're going to do here is, if you scroll down a bit on the MIDI page, you will see the type here is control change. We're going to change this over to note on. And for the trigger for this control, we also need to change that. So right above, next to trigger, it's currently set to any. We actually want this to be on rise. And I'll explain this here in a moment. So we have it set to trigger type rise, and we have our type set to note on. Our next values are going to be setting our channel, our note number, and that's all we'll need to change here on this specific page. So for channel, MaestroDMX documentation says everything needs to be on channel 16. And I will bring that window down here just to show you again. So there's our documentation. Everything on channel 16. So we got that figured out there. And we're going to create a button here for blackout. So blackout starts on key number 19. So we'll make a mental note of that. Key 19. And we've set our note on. We've set the channel to 16. That's a constant. We're also going to change the note option to constant. And that'll allow us to then edit the note number here. And we're going to set this to note number 19. Again, as we saw in the manual, everything on channel 16 and key number 19 there. So we've set that again to channel 16 and note 19. The rest of the values we can leave as they are. Now what I will typically do also is I will clear out this OSC option that appears at the bottom. By default, when you set these up, it will have MIDI and OSC options. We'll just close this OSC to delete that message specifically. Now, before we're done here, we do need to add an additional message, and that's going to be for the note off. And as you saw earlier, we did set our trigger to rise, so that is when we press the button, it will trigger. We also want it to send on a fall event, which is going to be the button being released. So at the very top here, next to messages, there is a plus icon. If you click that, that'll give you the option to choose MIDI, OSC, local, or gamepad, and we're going to choose MIDI again. And now we have another MIDI option here at the bottom. Now this one again is control change, so we need to first change that. And we're going to switch this one over to note off. And again, at the trigger at the top, we're going to click on that any option, and we're going to change this over to fall. And again, that first one is for rise, so that's on button press. And then fall is on button release. And take a mental note of that, because we will do the same thing for our cue buttons, which we will set those up as momentary buttons. And I'll explain to you again why we need that rise and that fall option available on those buttons as well. But so we have the rise one already built. We still need to build this fall one. So we set it to fall for trigger, and we set the type to note off. Now we need to set our channel, and again, that's going to be channel 16. As again, looking at that manual, everything needs to be on channel 16. And for blackout, again, that key number is 19. So we're going to go here again, and that one is, first one is constant. We're going to set our note to constant as well. And we're going to set that up to number 19. And once we have those values set, we are all set in creating our first button. Now, when you first add a button into TouchOSC, the button is just a plain gray button. Maybe you want to have that button have a label or something. Now, generally, I recommend resizing your buttons, make them a little bit bigger, because they are going to look tiny on your tablet-based screen. Especially if you're editing this in OSC, you'll see how small they are when you click on the play icon. We can actually click that now, and I'll show you. This is what the button looks like on our screen. Now, obviously, think of this as a tablet screen. I resized that. That's a decent sized button for a tablet screen, but the original button was definitely a lot smaller. So once you've resized your button, we're also going to want to add a label. And if you click the little plus icon at the top here again, that'll bring down your drop down, and this time choose label, and that will drop a label onto your TouchOSC window. And what I will typically do is I will drag that label into the center of the button. Make sure that label is selected. Don't select the button, but select the label. And you'll see the values here on the right will change. For the color, what I do is I just drag this A column all the way down. And that will make this transparent. So there's a transparent background. It will use the same background as the button background. So we're set there on our color. Again, drag the A value all the way down to 0. And that will make it transparent. And then if we scroll down a little bit more, we will see our option here for text. And this is to change that text on that label. So as we mentioned, we're doing a blackout one, so we're just going to label this one as blackout. And that places our label onto our button. So now we have a button with a label that says blackout. So it's real easy to tap, real easy to verify that that's the button you want to use there. So we've added one button. How about adding another button in here, just for good measure? So let's do the same thing. We'll click our plus icon at the top here. We'll click on button. Now, one thing you will notice is if you go this route, it will create that red button again. You'll have to resize it. You'll have to mess with it. You'll have to fill in all those details. What I actually suggest you do, once you have your first button created, highlight that entire button. So you either touch your screen and drag across, or if you're using your PC, click and drag over that button. That will highlight the button and the label. And then there is a option at the top here for copy. So if you click on copy, that will copy the items that you highlighted. And then if you click on paste, that will paste them. And now we have two buttons available. It just pasted those values into this new button here, including that label that we created. This will make it a lot easier for you later on. So once you have that first button created with all those values, definitely recommend using that copy option and paste option to save yourself the headache of having to go through all those steps of recoloring it, creating the label, setting the initial MIDI values on that button itself. Now we will still want to edit this second button that we created, because when we copy it, it copies all of the values to the new button. So as we see here, we have the button selected. If you scroll down a bit, you're going to see that MIDI option is still set for note on, but it's on note 19. And this button is going to be for our blinder. So again, pulling up our Maestro DMX values for MIDI, blinder is on key number 20. And we're also going to make sure this button is a toggle based button, and because we had copied it, it still is type toggle press, so we are set there. So the only thing we have to do to change this button is change that note number to 20 for MIDI note on, and the same thing for MIDI note off. Scroll down, change that note number to 20. And we've now already modified the second button to work as our blinder. The last thing we have to do is now we're going to highlight that option that we have for label on that button. So we're going to highlight that, make sure that is highlighted and not the button itself. And then on the right hand side, we're going to scroll down, we're going to find that text area, and we're going to change this over to blinder. And now we've successfully created two buttons to control our blackout and our blinder within MaestroDMX. And say we want to do the same thing for strobe and for fog. Now we can again highlight our button and copy and paste it. Or if you want to save yourself the trouble of creating multiple buttons, you can highlight the two buttons, hit the copy button, and then hit paste. And that will copy two buttons that you now can move over. And we're actually gonna redo that one more time here because I clicked off. So again, highlight both buttons, hit copy, and then hit paste. And now you can drag those two new buttons over. Now we're still going to want to modify these two because this one, as we saw previously, was on channel 19. Our blinder is on channel 20. And again, looking at our Maestro DMX manual here, strobe and fog are consecutive following that on 21 and 22. So we're going to go back here to TouchOSC, click on that third button. This is going to become our strobe button. So if we scroll down to the MIDI section, we see again this is set up for note on and note off, and it is a toggle press button. So we are going to change that note value again, this time to 21 for our strobe button, and the same thing again for note off, so make sure you set that to 21 as well. And then we're going to click on that label area, make sure the label is selected. We're going to scroll down to our option here under text, and we're going to label this one as strobe. And now that third button is all set. We're going to do the same thing for blinder. So we're going to click on the button for blinder, scroll down again to that MIDI section. Blinder is again on channel 22, if you look at our manual just to verify. And sorry, we are not doing blinder, we're doing fog for this fourth button. So this will be our fog button, and that one is on key number 22. So we're setting that value to 22 there, and we're going to do the same thing for our note off. So that one is now set to 22. And now we need to, again, choose that label option, scroll down to the text area, and we're going to change this one over to fog. So now we've created those first four buttons in Maestro for controlling those first four actions on the main page. We do have one more to add here, and that is for our effect button. So again, effect is right after fog. That one starts on key number 23. So we're going to grab one of those buttons this time, and we're going to highlight both the button and the label. That way we can copy it. We're going to click on that copy button again at the top, and click paste again at the top, and then we're going to drag that new button over. And as you guessed it, we're going to first click on that button, scroll down to the MIDI section. We're going to change that note value over to 23, because again, looking at our manual, 23 for that key number is going to be for effect. So we've done that for MIDI note on. Now we're going to scroll down, do the same thing for note off. And then once we've done that, we're going to choose our label for that button. Scroll down to the text area, and this time we're going to call this one effect. And there we now have our first 5 buttons for controlling those effects within Maestro. Now what if you want to add buttons for the cue-based controls? Now a lot of these cue-based controls you don't need to have toggle buttons specifically for. Those are best served as momentary buttons. So how do we create a momentary button? Now you can go through the process of the default button creation using the add button up here at the top, but I do suggest, again, because it was much easier to copy and paste, and we don't have to fill in all those details again, let's select that first row of 4 buttons, and we're going to copy, and then we're going to paste those buttons, and then we'll drag those down here. And these will become our new play, pause, stop, and then we'll make another button for we have a button here for previous, we'll make another one for next. So we've copied those buttons. Now we're going to click on that first one there. And these we want to set up as momentary buttons. So the only thing we have to change here, now that we've copied it, is we go down to button, and then under type, we're going to change that value from toggle press to momentary. And that will set that button up as a momentary button. We can do the same thing for the other 3, but we will first go through this first button, and we will modify those other 2 values for our note number. So again, let's look at our manual again here. So for our first button, we're going to do that previous button, and that's going to be key number 24. So we'll take a mental note of that. We will choose that button that we want to edit. We're going to scroll down to that MIDI section. Again, we've already set this button type to momentary, so we changed it from the toggle press to momentary. We're going to go down to the note on section, and we are going to change that key value over, or that note value over to 24. And this will become our previous button. And again, we want to do the same thing. Scroll down to note off and change that value to 24 as well. We can't forget we need to relabel this button, so we're going to click on that label portion of the button. That will change our view over here on the right. We're going to scroll down to the label to the text section. We're going to change this over to previous. And we've now completed creation of that previous button. We're going to do the same thing again here for blinder. We're going to change this button because this will become our next button. We already have a blinder button up here. So this is going to become our next button. So we are going to click on that button, scroll down. First thing we want to do is we want to change that type of the button from toggle press over to momentary. That will make it into a momentary button. Then we're going to scroll down to that MIDI section, and we're going to set our MIDI values. And again, looking at that manual, the value for next is key number 25. So we're going to change that note value there over to 25. We're going to do the same thing for note off. Change that value over to 25. And we can't forget to relabel that one, so again, click on that label. Scroll down to the text section, and we're going to rename this one to next. And we are now set with our previous and next buttons, so we're going to do the same thing for our play button, which should be the next one in the list. Again, looking at that manual, value for play is key number 26. So we'll choose that third button that we duplicated. Scroll down, we're going to change that from a toggle press to a momentary button. Scroll down a bit further, find those MIDI values, and we are going to set that to 26 for play. So again, change that note over to 26 for MIDI note on. We'll do the same thing for MIDI note off. Change that to 26. We can't forget to rename it again. So click on that label value there, go down to text, and we're going to change this over to play. And you've probably seen me do this enough, so I'm going to just rapidly go through and do this for that. Those 2 remaining buttons here, setting it to momentary again. We are setting this up as a pause button, so that one is 27. And again, we are going to fix that label. And we need to create one more, so we're going to choose that pause button. We will copy and paste it. Drag our new button down there. And now that we've copied this last one, we already have that momentary value set, so we don't got to do that this time. We're going to go down. We're going to set our note to note 28. Because again, looking at our MIDI values from the MaestroDMX update, 28 is our stop value. So we've set that for both MIDI on and MIDI off. And then again, we're going to rename that one to stop. We've now added those 5 buttons for triggering our cue specific effects. Now you also have the option to create buttons to trigger specific cue numbers, and that's again there in the MaestroDMX manual. Cue number 1 starts out at value 29. We have all the way up to key number 127 for select cue number 98. So just assume again, if it's Q2, add 1 to 29. If it's Q3, add 2 to 29, so on and so forth to add those buttons. So I will add a few basic buttons here for those cue numbers just to show you again that's how you create those. So we're just going to go through this pretty rapidly here. So again, in TouchOSC, we're going to copy a few of our buttons, and we've already created these as momentary. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to select those 4. We're going to copy and paste those, drag those 4 down, and these will become our new cue buttons. And again, talking about that manual, key number 29 is our first cue. So we are going to scroll down. We already have this set to momentary because we copied it. Scroll down here, change our note value to 29 for note on and for note off. Again, we can't forget to rename it. Label that one as Q1. Do the same thing for that second button. We've already duplicated it, so it's already momentary. So again, this one is going to be 30 and 30 for that note number. Click on our text, rename that. Rinse and repeat. Now, even though I am doing this on PC, this is going to look very similar to when you do it on a tablet. This will be our last one. This will be 32 for our note number. And then we'll rename this one to Q4. And we have now created some buttons that we can control using MaestroDMX. Using an Android tablet, wired up to MaestroDMX with a USB cable. So when you first plug your tablet into MaestroDMX, we'll switch over to my window here, which will contain both the MaestroDMX interface over here on the right. I have my tablet down here on the bottom left, and then we have just a video window showing our lights and the actions that will happen when we trigger those events using TouchOSC. Now, I already created my own custom MaestroDMX TouchOSC window, so I will kind of show you what that looks like here. And once you have all your buttons added, you're going to need to make sure that your TouchOSC is configured to send out that value over MIDI and over the Android USB peripheral port. So as you see here, you're going to click on that little link icon at the top there, not the play icon, but right next to it there's a link icon. If you click that, that will bring up your connections window. Make sure that MIDI is selected for connections. And then for connection 1, for the send port, you're going to click on Browse, and you're going to choose Android USB peripheral port. That's all you have to do. You are all set setting up that USB interface for MIDI. Then you'll be able to plug your Android tablet in to MaestroDMX. So I will unplug it here for a quick second, and we'll plug it back in. It'll be a second, and then and actually, I'm going to undock my tablet here. So we will plug it in one more time here. There we go. And then just to confirm, every time you plug into USB, you do need to make sure that your USB settings are set to MIDI. This will change by default back to no data transfer. So every time you plug in, you will have to go into USB preferences, make sure that MIDI is set. And now that we have our connection set up in TouchOSC on Android, we have the Android USB peripheral port set, we have our tablet set up for MIDI support, we can now click on that play icon, and that will switch over to our live view for those buttons. I'm just going to redock this here real quick so that it will charge. So there we go. So now we have those MIDI buttons configured, and I'll just show you here really quick. We'll click on that blackout button there, and then I'll show you that view again. So as we see here, scrolling down to that button, to that message value, we have that same MIDI note on value set for constant, channel 16, note 19, and for that note off, same thing, channel 16, note 19, and that is for all of these buttons. So as you see there, that is all set. Matches what I had on that PC version, just to show everybody. I did, however, recolor my play and stop buttons just to make it easy to click on. So, you know, green is play, red is stop. You'll also see those buttons. Those are being cut off at the bottom, but my previous and next buttons are there at the very bottom. So I'll click on play again, so now you see all those buttons available to you. I added 16 cue select buttons. As you see in my Maestro, I only have 6 cues currently configured, so it'll only work for the first 6. The more cues you have, the more cue buttons you'll probably need. But this layout seemed pretty clean to me. You know, it has the 5 buttons at the top. The first row is our blackout, our blinder, and our strobe buttons. Those are specifically impacting all the lights, so that's why I put them in that first row. My fog and effect buttons, those are in that second row, and that's for triggering a fog or an effect style fixture. Then we have our play, pause, stop, and our previous and next for controlling our cue control, and then all those individual cue buttons there over on the right. So, we have it plugged in, we have it connected with USB. What happens when we push a button? So let's push on that blackout button. As you saw, as soon as I pressed that, the lights blacked out with Maestro. One thing you will notice, however, is that Maestro will not show that blackout button being triggered here in the web interface. So don't panic if you don't see that. At some point, the team will likely push an update that will push data up to these buttons, so we'll actually see them click when you press the MIDI. But just know for right now, these 5 buttons at the top are not going to show activity when you trigger them via MIDI. Now, since these buttons are toggle buttons, blackout will remain toggled until I press it again. So this is that one benefit of triggering via MIDI. You can set those specific buttons for blackout, for blinder, for strobe to a toggle style button. So if I click it again, it will untoggle that, and now our lights are working again. Same thing for our blinder. We can click the blinder button. The lights will be fully lit until I'm ready to turn that blinder off. Click it again. Blinder is now off again. Same thing for strobe. Click it, your lights start strobing. They continue to strobe until you tap that button again. And for those fog effects, if you have a fog machine, you don't want to hold that button down while it's running. That fog button is definitely going to help you with regards to triggering those fog style effects, so you can fog up the room without having to hold that button down. So as we see there, that fogger is going. It'll continue to go until I press that button again, and then it will stop fogging the room. And then we have that effect button. I currently don't have any effect fixtures set up. Normally this would be for like your flame effects or your sparkulars, like your sparkler effects style, but that button would trigger any of those fixtures that you have configured with effect specifically set. So those buttons are all working as intended. We now have those cue triggers, our play, pause, stop, previous, and next buttons. And these ones will show activity in the Maestro window. So if you click on any of these buttons, you will see those triggers happening on the web UI as well. So if I just click on play, that's going to immediately trigger that first cue that we have selected there in the web interface. As we see, that cue has triggered, and that cue is now running. We can pause that, so if we click on pause, that will pause that cue. We've now see that the timer has stopped, and that cue is in a paused state. You see it's no longer playing there. We can click play again, and it will start playing again. So as we see, the play and pause buttons are showing activity there in that web UI interface. Same thing with stop. If we have an event playing, we can click on stop, and that will stop that event, and we now see that, yes, it is stopped down here. It shows it's stopped. If we want to restart that, we can click on play, and that will restart that specific cue. Now those previous and next buttons do exactly what you think they do. Clicking on next will move up to the next cue in the list. So to see there, I click next, it moved to the next cue item. Same thing again, click next again, it will move up. And if you do the previous options, click on previous, you'll see that will go backwards. Previous option, and now we're back at that first one. And then we have our array of buttons on the right hand side here for triggering specific cues themselves. So if I wanted to trigger specifically cue number 6, I'm going to push the cue 6 button. that will trigger that Q6 specific item there under my show control, and that one will start playing. Same thing if I want to move up to Q2, press Q2, and now we are playing Q option number 2. And we can click through any one of these to trigger any of those cues that we have currently set in our show control interface. So again, there is MaestroDMX being controlled by an Android tablet. Again, if you have an Android tablet running, it could work with even previous versions of Android. Like I said, I've tested with Android 11 through Android 14. I definitely suggest using a tablet style interface versus like a cell phone, because you'll get a lot more room for buttons, a lot more real estate to add buttons to that interface. The software again is TouchOSC. That software is fairly inexpensive. On the Android Play Store, it is $11.99 to purchase it. The PC software I specifically use to create my interface, that software is free, so you don't have to pay anything for the software. It will throw some warnings at you saying, hey, you should license this, you should support us. But if it's easier for you to build your own interface on PC, you do have that option to build the interface, and then you can just export and import it into Maestro itself. And I will show you here just, again, I have that interface built. I'm going to load the one that I was showing you on the tablet, the one that I built myself. So as we see, we have this interface here. Once you've built it all out, it's real easy to export. All you need to do, have that interface open, and then you'll have the option here from File. You can do Export, and export it as XML, or you can just do File and Save. And I do suggest doing the File Save option, because that will create the TouchOSC file extension that you can then open on your Android tablet to load that interface. So I'm just going to choose Save here. And then again, you'll see this warning if it's unregistered. They depend on your support, so definitely support them if you can. Purchasing the license for Android does support them in a way. So we're just going to do that, and that has saved that file. And I'll do a Save As just to kind of show you what you would normally see is that Save As prompt. Choose your file name. I named mine as MaestroDMX. As you see here, there's that TouchOSC document labeled MaestroDMX. That will save that to your PC, and then you can upload it somewhere where you can download it then to your Android tablet. And then on your Android tablet itself, once you have the TouchOSC app purchased and installed, in order to import that specific value into your TouchOSC, we will just clear this document that we had open. We're going to open up that menu option over there on the right-hand side. And I should probably switch over to my tablet window so you guys can watch. So again, we are going to open up TouchOSC on our Android tablet. There's that navigation button there on the right. We're going to open up that navigation button. We're going to choose that option for import. We're going to click that import button to then download that file specifically. If you upload it to Google Drive, easy peasy, you can just download it right to your tablet from there. So I already created that file there and I uploaded it to Drive. So I am just going to go back to this window here. So once you have that file downloaded, it will be there on your machine. Locate that file, click on it there, make sure it's selected in the list, and that will import that interface into your tablet, and then you'll be able to control, edit any of those buttons if you choose, move them around, or you'll be able to go right into that play mode to start using that interface within MaestroDMX. So again, hopefully this video was helpful for you. If you have an Android tablet laying around the house that you're not really using, may be beneficial for you to set this up so you have a MIDI level control within Maestro. I am also going to provide a link to this specific TouchOSC file that I created. So if you're feeling a little like, this is a lot of work building my own interface, I have provided a file that's already pre-built for you. The only thing you have to do is make sure that TouchOSC is configured within the interface to connect using the Android USB port. So again, within TouchOSC, once you have it installed, you click that little link at the top there. That brings up the connection window. Make sure you click Browse for that first connection. Set it to Android USB peripheral port, and then you're all set. And you can download that TouchOSC file that I will link in the video description. So you won't have to do all this work. I've already created that interface for you. You'll just have to load that file and import it into TouchOSC, and then you'll have this interface ready to go. So again, thank you for watching my video. And hopefully this was helpful for you, especially for those users that want to do MIDI control but maybe don't have a controller yet or don't have an easy way to program their own controller within TouchOSC. So this way may be beneficial for you. There's a small cost associated. Again, that software is $11.99, but it's pretty inexpensive in comparison to purchasing a high-end controller, which can sometimes be upwards of $100 or more for MIDI control. So once again, thanks for watching my video. I know I've said this a few times now, but look out for more videos of mine posted. I'll likely do some more videos here shortly. Also, if you have any questions, definitely post in the Facebook group. Send a response to that MaestroDMX support group or post in the Discord channel. And again, we will see you in the next video. Thank you.